Hi, I'm Ron Nutter, and welcome to another edition of Tech Bites with Ron Nutter. In this episode, we're going to talk about setting up FreeNAS for your smart home. And it's not just a storage system. Remember that. You're going to see more of this as this develops. We're going to have a little bit of historical context so that you can see what's caused me to go to this point and why you should look at it too. This content is available as an Amazon Flash briefing or podcast. Please go to techbiteswithronnutter.com for more information for any items mentioned in this episode. There are affiliate links in the description. If you click on these links, I will get a small commission, but that won't affect the price you pay for the item. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please click on subscribe and enable notifications. If this video helps you or provides value, please click on that like button, thumbs up. Now, here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to go over kind of a roadmap because you've seen me do other videos on the Raspberry Pi NAS, and that's still a part of my process. I'm still going to keep that around. We're going to go over the parts required, and then we'll get into the installation and setup. So this is something really is going to be well worth your time. So to switch over here, we'll go over to a little not PowerPoint, but a slide system that I have set up. And this is kind of what I first got started with. This was a Raspberry Pi NAS running Open Media Vault, and I started out with a single drive. Well, then I decided, well, if that drive fails, I need to have a spare. So that's when I went to RAID 1 or mirroring. Again, that's what I'm using today because with the content I'm producing here on YouTube and some other projects I've got going on, I needed a good way to back it up. And I really thought about going to RAID 5. And I'm still going to do a video on that one, but I'm looking at probably going to the Raspberry Pi 4 because right now the bottleneck I've got to deal with, limitation on the Raspberry Pi 3B of 100 meg. And at least with the Raspberry Pi 4, I can get a little more bandwidth. Let me put this in context. The average video I produce, I will have probably 4 to 6 gigs worth of video information. That takes about a half hour to 40 minutes because it's a 100 meg connection, and I'm also dealing with USB drives. And let's face it, they can only go so fast. And there's some people who have said, well, why'd you do it with USB drives if they're not supported under Open Media Vault? Well, that's a good question, and here's why. It's what I had available, and there is a way to do it. There are just some people who don't think you should do that. Well, we kind of all have to do things at times that we it may not be the supported way, but you can get it to work. So what we're going to look at doing is I'm going to go into a FreeNAS setup, and you see the chassis here that I'm going to use, and we're going to get the motherboard set up and get the drive set up, and it's going to be an interesting experience. Now, another reason I went to this is I want to have this RAID 5, and I'm using the term RAID 5. There's actually with the ZFS or system that FreeNAS uses, there's a different terminology to use for it, and I want to keep this just for the YouTube content. So as I'm doing some experimentations with NFS, with iSCSI, other things, I'm actually going to set up a second pair of drives and use just solely on that. So if something happens and I do something wrong or the software hiccups, then I've got a way to cover things. So I'm trying to have a backup system, plus the cabinet that I got will handle about, it easily handles 6 drives, and we might be able to get a few more in there, and I may have to go to an add-on SATA card, but that's down the road. So, and I said, there was more than this to just being storage, and there is. You can virtualize some servers. Now, granted, you're not going to virtualize a heavy-duty system. It's not meant for that, but there's some things that I think it's going to do, and I'm already looking at having to do some upgrades, much as the RAID 1 system that I talked about here. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to kind of run you through the process of what I'm looking at. Now, the memory that this requires is 8 gigs minimum. And that's what I ordered because at the time I started looking at this, then it was a case of, okay, this is going to do what I'm just looking purely from a NAS standpoint. And then as I got through the online training that's available from the folks at FreeNAS, and trust me, you need to do that. I'll have a link in the description. That's when I started to realize there was going to be a little bit more. Now, as to the hard drive that I'm using, now this is one from Barracuda, and it's from Seagate, and it's one I've used the brand before. Now they have some that are made specifically for NASs. Now, the reason I went with this one is this is affordable. It was about $50. And with 3 of them, of course, that adds up real quick. The other thing is I'm not going to leave this on all the time. Part of my plan is to, since I'm only producing content a few days a week, I'm going to leave the NAS turned off. That way, in case there's an electrical surge, and it's going to be on a UPS, but let's face it, I like having backup plans, and sometimes my backup plans have backup plans. So you want to look at it from that standpoint. Now, I did go with the Intel i3 chip. I initially was going to go Celeron. I was trying to keep this budget. I mean, just as cheap as I could get it. But when I found out about the virtualization functionality and with looking at how I was thinking of growing this, then it became obvious very quickly that that wasn't going to work. So that's why I went to the i3. Now, what you have to keep in mind is you're going to have to keep that chip cool. Now, Intel, to their credit, does send a cooler or a fan that you put on top of the CPU, but I went and took it up a notch because that way I really wanted to keep the CPU as absolutely cool as I could without going down the road of water chilling and that kind of thing. But this goes right on top. And from the reports that I've read, it keeps the CPU about 20 degrees cooler than the stock Intel cooler does. And again, I'm right now not planning on running this heavy, but with the server virtualizations and adding drives, I want the CPU being kept cool. So that's the process. Now, the first thing we're going to do, and the map that comes with the case is great. It really walks you through it. Now, I should have said this earlier in the video, and I apologize for not having done so. This video is targeted at those that have never put a system together, or it has been many years, like myself. I haven't really put together a system, and let's put it was over 10 years. We'll just leave it at that. So this is going to be a learning experience for both of us. Now, the documentation that comes with the case is great. It walks you through the process as best it can. I'm going to do things slightly out of sequence because I've got a small studio, so I can't have everything spread out like I would like to. So we're going to put the motherboard together first, set it aside, then bring the case in, mount the power supply, and that's another thing you're going to, and I forgot to get the video with the power supply up. There are 2 kinds of power supplies. There's what I call the regular power supply, which has this big thick harness coming out of it. And then there's one called modular. And modular is the way I went, because this way the cabling, I only use the connections I want to. I don't have to worry about having to bundle things up and have it off to the side. And if, heaven forbid, a power supply does fail, and I have had them fail, this way I can take out just the power supply, unhook connections from the power supply, put the new one in, put the connections back on, and it's far less hassle. So I was trying to do some planning and future proofing on this one. So let's go ahead and switch over and get started on putting that motherboard together. Okay, now we've got the demo table, as I'll call it, in place. So what you're looking at here is I got to look away just a moment here. It's the Gigabyte B460M D3H. Now, say that was a mouthful. This is what I'm going to use for the motherboard for my FreeNAS system. And it was several things led to it. It has got quite a bit of USB connectivity over here, which is I'm going to need once we go into FreeNAS, because I'm going to have the server actually booting off of USB. Yeah, I know. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do mirrored USB, because it only reads it on startup and has minimal activity, so it really won't slow it down. Because if you've never dealt with FreeNAS or something like that before, it has to have its own drive. You can't use a drive for FreeNAS and store their data on it. Not going to happen. So that's why I'm electing to do that. And with RAID 1, with flash gets corrupted or something happens, I got a backup already there. Now, the other things you'll want to be aware of, that's your 4 SATA connectors, and this one right here is, for some reason they went to an angle, it will have 2 more, so you can have 6 drives native on here. Now supposedly you can get splitters that will let you run 2 drives on one. I've been told that that's not a good thing to do because you start cutting your throughput. It's going to be a while before I get to 6 drives, so I'll worry about that when it happens. Now this is the part we'll have to take some time with. It's putting the CPU in and putting the cooler on. Now this is the 4 memory slots on here, and it tells you very clearly right there which slots to go with first. So we're going to do these first 2, which are, looks like they're gray versus black, so they make it easy to call out. And then once we get this all put together, then we'll set this aside and start to work on the FreeNode. Hopefully I'm not getting it botched too badly. The case I'm going to use, and get the drives mounted. Then we'll mount the power supply. Then we'll mount the motherboard. This is not something you want to try to do in 30 or 45 minutes. Just take your time. Again, take your time. It's not worth rushing. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, because of the cooler that I'm using, I have to put on something called a back plate. And this is to give the cooler something to grip to, because it's high enough up, it can't just use these 4 holes here. So let's swing this over here, and there's only one way this goes on, and they pretty much are going to tell you right there, because of this little dimple right here. That's where that will fit on, and we'll just hold this until we set it down, and then, and it slipped on me. That's great. And I'm trying not to handle the motherboard any more than I absolutely have to. So let's do here. Let's put this back on. I almost thought about putting some tape on here, but I didn't. It's easier to set this thing on the first time than it was this time. Okay, come on. And you don't want to go travel around with it here. There we go. All right, now. So I'm going to reach up with the plastic bag and support this. And come over here to the side and just gradually. There we go. That works better that time. Now, this is when we're going to put the CPU in. So if you've never done one of these before, just take your time. So we'll pull this out here, and you don't take that plastic cover off. We'll let the CPU do that for us. So we'll get this up out of the way. Now, I've already got the chip out of its case, and we'll grab it by its side here, because we don't want to have any contact with these pads on the bottom, because over time the oils in your finger could cause a problem. Now, something to know here, you will see a little very tiny arrow there, and if you go down to the motherboard, you will see a tiny arrow there. There's also a pin on each side that help you line this up. So we'll just carefully sit this down, and just literally it just set right in. Just wiggle it there just a little bit to make sure it's firmly in place. Okay, so now we will come back with here and put this down, and see that it popped that right out. And you will want to save this. If for some reason you either have to return the board for warranty, or you want to change, for some reason change the chip, you want to have this just to protect those pins, because there's pins that are in there that are going to be an absolute booger to deal with if you have to redo those. Now, before we go on to the cooler, let's go ahead and do the memory sticks. And had I planned a little further ahead, I probably would have gotten some larger memory sticks, but again, starting out with, this is simply going to be a NAS box, and that's it. When I start doing some of the virtual machines, then I will probably upgrade the memory. And let's pull these tabs out here and Then we can just set the memory right in here. And one of the reasons I'm keeping this on top of the anti-static bag and the board is to keep it from... Okay, got it wrong. It's a key connector, so I did it wrong. Oh well, story of my life here. Okay, now we'll go down here, and as you carefully rock it in, you don't want to shove it in, but you'll see the little fingers on the side that we pushed away come right back in, and they'll snap up. So we'll repeat that here with this, and try not to handle it any more than I have to, and that's why I've been keeping the bag on the board on top of the bag. And we'll just, and there's all sorts of anti-static steps you can do, so I'm just trying to be reasonable here. I'll come in under the motherboard this time, and we will, okay, and there, it's all in there. I didn't want to force it down too hard. Now, and in doing so, I've undone what I did for the okay, let's get this back in here. All right, now let's get this here. All right, get this over here. All right, now we're ready for the cooler. Now, there is a power connection right over here, and this is the way that it's labeled CPU fan, so we'll put that on top of there. We'll undo the cable here, and so when you get this set on, there's no right or wrong way to put this on here, but you'll want to make sure you got plenty of room for the cable to make its way over there. You don't want a whole lot of extra, but just to be on the safe side. Now, you notice I've been careful to leave this little plastic cap on, and that's because this has already got the thermal paste pre-applied, and we want to make sure that we don't mess with that. I did go ahead and order some thermal paste extra just in case. And we'll just carefully set this down here. Make sure it hit all 4 holes. And if you don't already have an iFixit toolkit, spend a little bit of money and get one before you get too far into this. And then you can make things a lot easier to do. All right, and it even tells you, bless their little pea picking hearts, what tool to use. And most time, apparently, it's going to be what they call the Phillips head number 2. So we'll just carefully, don't want to tighten one all the way in, all the way down, because it's going to have to get settled. So we will just turn each one a little bit at a time. And just get them all down. Again, there's no race to get this done. And okay, that's there. And let me turn this a little bit so I can get to that a little easier. Okay, that's... And as soon as you feel resistance, that's a good point at which to stop. Okay, that's... And just do another, just to check to make sure we've got everything all leveled. And with this being a keyed connector, it only goes on one way. So we'll go ahead and put it right over here. And that way, that's all set, ready to go. And so now it's just a matter of getting the drive, they get the power supply mounted in the case, getting the drives mounted. Then there's some standoffs that we'll have to put in where, with this being a standard size board, I'll put the standoffs already in the case, and then we should be able to lower this right down, fasten it in. Again, the manual that comes with the motherboard is very good about telling you what you're going to have to do. Or actually, with the case, tells you what to do as you go along the way. So that's the motherboard process. So now we'll move on to the different parts of getting the drives mounted, getting the power supply mounted, putting the motherboard in, and we'll just keep moving in that direction. Okay, well, it took a little longer to get the studio ready for this part. I had to basically disassemble as much as I could of the case and get everything else moved in, because I said I've got a fairly small area, but I wanted to do it right. Now, the power supply that I picked was not going to be my first one. Between the shipping service that Amazon was using, it sat somewhere for 5 days and didn't move. So obviously I had to go find another one because I didn't feel like waiting a long time to get the power supply. Now, everything that I've picked so far is a result of a site called PC Part Picker, and it really made it easier, because if you haven't done any PC assembly, it at least gives you a fighting chance of what to do. Now, this is the EVGA 750. Now, it's a 750 watt power supply. Now, this is what they call a full modular, because it doesn't have any harness coming out of it. You just plug the cables in as you need them. And this goes on the back, and it's got the 4 mounting holes. And what I was a little surprised with, I thought this would be the top, because when I have dealt with power supplies in the past, the fan was on top. Not so much this one, because the case that this is going into from, let me get over here and look. I should have had it remembered, Fractal Design. They've got a vent on the bottom, and to their credit, they've also got some guards on it that keep the dust bunnies from getting as bad. So we'll put this in, and this is about, 8 pounds ish. We'll get this put in, and then we'll move on to getting the standoffs mounted for the motherboard, and we'll just keep moving in that direction. So let's switch over here, and we'll keep putting the pieces together. So you can see here, it's a nice cabinet. It's got 3 fans already built in. And you've heard me talk about the iFixit toolkits. This is one of the things that's really going to help keep your sanity. And this is the lid to any of the iFixit toolkits. It's got little grids laid out, and it's going to help you keep everything mounted, not mounted, but help you keep it all straight. So again, using the Fractal Design manual, it says to use the Phillips head number 2. Okay, now we're at a point that we're ready to start installing FreeNAS. Now, I know that I told you I was going to take you along the journey as I put all the hardware in. It became evident very quickly that that simply wasn't going to work. So what I will tell you is get your manual for the motherboard and the manual for the cabinet that you're using, if you're using a cabinet other than what I've got, and follow them through, and that will get you up and running. Now, there are 2, can I find them here? There are 2 different connections. You've got this one that is the power connection, hence because of this plug coming off the power supply. That will get you up and running, and I was trying to find my other one here. Basically, it's if you plug those 2 on your drives, and I started with not drive, but disk 0, and then 1, 2, and 3, and just build them out. And then I'm going to label the cables. Once I get everything up and done, I'm going to label everything so that if I have to do any troubleshooting, since I can't do hot swaps, then that will get things a little bit easier to handle. So I've got one of the boot flash drives that I'm going to use, and this is actually, I've had to do about 5 or 6 installs because I was troubleshooting what looks like maybe an unsupported network card on the motherboard that I'm using. So I happened to find one that's USB-C based, so that will get me up and running, and then I'm off to figure out and go into the forums and figure out where The problem may be if I've got a bad card. I don't think I do, but it may be I have one that is unsupported. I'm surprised the USB C one was there, so it made me very happy. So let's switch over here to the system, and I'll power it up. And what we should see is it'll come up here momentarily. I just heard the drives all chatter. It was checking them to see how they were, and then it should go through and starting to do the FreeNAS install. For some reason it likes to wait. I tried hitting the enter key to go on, but obviously it didn't want to play nice with that one. And from having been down this road a few times, I have learned I have to move over my keyboard since I didn't have an extra keyboard laying around, and what you see on the screen is acknowledging it's got it. So we will press enter to that, and we will select the SanDisk UltraFit, and we'll do that, enter, and then proceed with installation. And I will just put in a password so that it's happy. And we'll tell it to boot via UEFI, since that seems to be the way everybody wants to go. And then we'll just let it churn along its merry little way. So this is where it kind of picks back up to speed again and just goes on its merry little way. Now that's where it's changing the password. And okay, it said it has successfully installed it, so we'll hit OK. And then we will tell it to reboot. And once the screen goes black, I'll pull out the drive that is my installer. And I did opt for a separate drive just in case I do have to do a installation. It will be ready to go. So it is now going to come up. It'll go through its process here. And okay, it has found where you see Realtek USB. That's where it has found that USB-C. It's a combination network card / USB hub. I just happen to have that laying around, so that's the fortunate thing that will at least allow it to come up and running. And then we'll just have to see as to do I go with a conventional card or just continue to use that one. And as long as it works, it's fine, but I would rather have a proper RJ45 to plug a network cable into than to just have to have the USB-C one, because I really didn't want to have that one tied up. And this is the part that's going to take just a little while, and it doesn't kid when it says this is going to take a while. Okay, so it's gone through that process, and we should be getting up to where we can, I won't say log in, but it's not seeing the USB network card is not getting an IP address, as you can tell, because it's not giving us one here. So we will do go in and delete the interface, restarting it. Aha, okay, we had to delete the interface and restart. Then it was happy. Okay, well, you at least now see what to do when it decides not to play nice. And 10.0.1.226. Okay, it obviously is working at this point, so it'll be root, and then the password that you entered during setup. Don't really care, so it's talking to it over the network, so that's a good thing. So now what we've got to do is scroll down here. Okay, that didn't have anything we needed. So if we will go to storage, pools, we don't have a pool at this point, so let's go here, click here and add. We are going to create a pool, and I'm going to call this one YouTube, because that's going to be all the stuff that I'm going to be on here, using on here. So we will do that, and let's see, suggest layout. Well, that's pretty much going to do what I thought. RAID Z, which is what I was wanting to do, and it won't let you select. I could do Stripe, Mirror, or RAID Z. So RAID Z is fine. We'll effectively have what I wanted to do, and we can add a spare. So I will do that. Looks like we can add data later on too, and then we will click create. And we will confirm and create pool. So that is, now we just got to case and hurry up and wait for it to get done. And this is the part that, oh, okay, it is done. All right, so we have 3.51 terabytes free. Okay, that's good. Now what we will want to do, let's see, network, don't need to fool with that one. Sharing, we will do SMB, and we are going to click add. Path, we'll just call it YouTube. I'm not going to use it as a home share. I will allow guest access. And let's see, let's click on that. Make sure it's going to do what I think it is. Privilege same as guest account. Okay. OS clients. All right. All right. Well, we will click on must provide within a mount pool. Okay, that's nice. Okay, YouTube. All right, well now it's happy, so it should be. All right, enable service, yes. SMB has been enabled. Okay, if we do accounts, users, and just to make this easy, I will click add. And I'm gonna, this is just to make this match the other system I've got. I'll just have username, user, don't care about the email. Give it its password. And directories and partitions. We will give it group and other. At this point, I just simply want it to work, and we will click YouTube. All right, we've got that. So we should have that up in place. Okay, we do. And let's click dashboard to see if he's a happy camper. And pool YouTube 1 VDev. Okay, that's fine. All right, so now, okay. Now is when we've got to go figure out how to get it to map, because I'm usually doing this from a map network drive. Here we go. So we will map a network drive. And let's see if we network. All right, let's go //10.0.1.226 YouTube. And we'll connect using different credentials. User. Remember my credentials. Okay, and now we should see YouTube. And okay, so it's set up whatever it has to out there. Okay, so at this point, we are up and running. It took a little while to get there, but you see some of the challenges that I went through, and then we'll just have to investigate a few of them and probably do another video to help figure out where things kind of went squirrely, and then I will start copying over from the other drive or the other NAS to or SAN NAS. I use the terms interchangeably, and I'll probably get some mail over that one. So 10.0.1.226, and I'll probably want to go and reserve that address. I usually don't do fixed IPs. I'll reserve them at the on the DHCP server. So that's something else we'll have to do. But anyway, you see where things are. It took us a little while to get it up and running, but nothing that we can't get past. And it's just having a few extra pieces, parts to get that running. So now I've got to start the migration process, and then we'll just do the doing the RAID 1 on the boot drive, and some other things will go on. But this video's run on long enough. I don't want to keep you any longer, but you now see what I've had to go through and some things you may want to have handy just in case. So you're going to see at this point some videos to the right or to the left of other things that YouTube may suggest that you want to watch. This is one of several I'm going to be doing on the FreeNAS, because you can see it's got a lot of possibilities. So if this video has provided value to you or helped you along the way, if you click on that like button, I would really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please click on that subscribe button now, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.